Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Nick here with Accountability Now Norwin, and I have been getting a lot of people reaching out to me, sharing some experiences, some issues, some grievances they have. Um, and it kind of has me thinking, what is the best way that I could be of service to the people? And it's like that old saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. So in essence, I think that educating the public on how to resolve their own grievances would be, the best use of both mine and your time. My time in educating, your time in learning, and in turn educating yourself. So that being said, so let's first start off with the who. The Pennsylvania General Assembly created the law. It applies to state and local government agencies, including township, counties, school districts, and state agencies. It is overseen by the Pennsylvania Office of Open Records, the OOR, established to enforce the law and handle appeals. What is the purpose? The right to know law is Pennsylvania's version of a public records and transparency law. It grants citizens the right to access public records held by government agencies with certain exemptions like personal privacy, law enforcement investigations, and security issues. It replaces the old restrictive law where records were presumed closed unless proven otherwise. Now records are presumed open unless the agency can prove an exemption applies. This applies across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, covering all public bodies, state agencies, local governments, commissions, boards, and public schools. So that would be your where. The first right to know law in PA was enacted in 1957, but major reforms came with Act 3 of 2008. This was signed into law in February of 2008 by Governor Ed Rendell. Thank you, Governor Rendell. If you did anything, we thank you for that. And it took effect on January 1st of 2009. The 2008 overhaul was considered one of the most significant government transparency reforms in Pennsylvania history. So before 2008, Pennsylvania was considered one of the least transparent states in terms of public records. Citizens had to prove why they should be given access. So, prior to 2008, we had to prove to them why we needed this. A whole lot of explaining that should have never had to have been done, and luckily in 2008 they rectified some of this. So the 2008 reforms flipped the presumption. Records are now presumed public. This was intended to promote government accountability, transparency, and trust. So this is kind of how it works. So the citizen submits a right to know request to the appropriate agency's office of open records officers. So each agency, whether it be the police department, the school district, Irwin Borough, North Irwin, North Huntington, they all should have an open records officer. So again, the agency must respond within 5 business days with limited extensions allowed. If denied, citizens can appeal to the Office of Open Records, which issues binding decisions. Further appeals can go to the Commonwealth Court and in some cases the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So that in a nutshell is what your right to know request is. That's the law. That's how it came about. This is an extremely important tool for us to be using. So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you have an incident take place and you're not happy with the way the police handled the incident. So, what would be your steps, your first couple of steps to remedying your situation? Well, first and foremost, I hope that you have the officers' names, their badge numbers, the time that the incident occurred, or at least a general idea, right? It was Monday, May 5th at 3 p.m. Okay, now what you're going to do with that information is you're going to submit a right to know request. So in North Huntington, which is where I've been primarily operating, right, you're going to go to their permits and forms. And under here, they have a right to know request form. Now they have their own. You can fill it out right here online. I typically fill it out on here, turn it into a PDF, attach it to an email because this is never enough room for what I'm requesting. And then I get it emailed over to hfalk@nhtpa.us. That is the Open Records Officer, Harry Falk, Township Manager. That's normally who you're going to see. Township or Borough Manager is going to be the one fielding the right to know request. So then I would check here if I want printed copies, electronic copies, if I want to inspect the records in person, things of that nature. So again, this applies to North Huntington Township, but if we go, the Office of Open Records has a standard form, right? So this is what they gave us. This is the standard form. There's also a hyperlink here where you can get, some more information on how this all works. But let's say we're doing this in Irwin. So we come right down here and they have an RTK form. Boom. Puts us right here. We get this filled out. But who are we sending it to? Right? That's the question. Who would we be sending that to? Well, we can come up here to, let's see, what do I think it would be under? Departments? Administration. There it is. Right to know officer. That is Sherry Martino. She can be reached at 724-864-3100, extension 15. There's also an email address here. So if you're in Irwin and you want to file a right to know request, you're going to be sending that in to Miss Martino. Now, if you're asking for an incident report from the police department, like I said, let's say May 5th, 3 p.m., Miss Martina may tell you that you have to file this request with the department. I'm not sure how it exactly works in Irwin, but nonetheless, Sherry should be able to get you the information and point you in the right direction of where to get this right to know request form filled out. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you need body cam footage, if you need audio or video recording of any kind, that would be done with an Act 22. And we can take a look at that in another video. But let's come over here. What if you're in North Irwin, right? And you need to get some information out of North Irwin. So the mayor here, John McIntyre, council members, Sue Kochman, Shannon Zeros, Dawn Zeros, Lisa Kovac. Okay, so here's your treasurer. Do we have a right to know? Not seeing it. However, if you get a hold of Sue, I'm sure she'd be willing to help point you in the right direction as to who you get your right to know information to. Now, again, they have five. So let's say I want information on, it's good to be specific. So I want to know how much North Irwin spent on salt this past winter. I'd fill out the right to know form. That's the question I have. I'd get it sent over to them, to their open records officer, and then wait for them to tell me how much we spent on salt. Now, this is not specific to where you live, so it's not like you have to live in North Irwin to submit requests to North Irwin. You can live, anywhere in the country and submit these right to know requests. There is no I know that in North Huntington Township, they try to tell you there's all these requirements to, you have to live, the school district does it too. You have to live in the district and you have to be a resident of North Huntington Township and and that's just not the case. You have freedom of speech, you have freedoms, and they're good everywhere. Supremacy clause of the Constitution states that no policy, law, nothing at the state level can supersede a constitutional right. So it doesn't matter where you're from, where you live, none of that matters. If you have a question, you can get that sent in and you should be able to get an answer within 5 days, or that, again, they can ask for the extension, 30-day extension. But at the end of the day, in order for them to deny the information to you, they have to have good reason, and then you can file that appeal. Now, we did have a situation in North Huntington occur with a hit and run involving the president commissioner, Jason Atwood, no longer president commissioner. He was stripped of that title, but he had a hit and run incident, it would seem, and they do not want to give us the incident report. They only want to provide the front page of the report. It's a closed case. There's no reason we can't have that report. But they've denied it. Office of Open Records, we appealed with them. They said, oh, no, they can have the report. And guess what? They're still choosing not to give it to us. And now Chelsea Dice isn't even showing up at the meetings, and she's the one that's, playing games with all of this in the Court of Common Pleas in Greensburg. So, again, this was kind of how some information I thought could be helpful to a majority, if not everybody, that follows. This is the right to know, the Act 3, huge tool for the people, needs to be used, even if they're denying your request for information, or they're doing what I just explained they're doing to us about this hit and run report with Jason Atwood. It's still good to get the documentation out there. What we'd like to do on the back end of Accountability Now Norwin is we'd like to build a repository of information where citizens eventually, for example, you have an issue with the North Huntington Police. We have all their badge numbers, we have their salaries, we have their email addresses, we have a lot of information when it comes to the North Huntington Police Department. You don't have to file a right to know request with Harry Falk. You can come directly to us, but we'd like to build these repositories, maybe get them linked up on Discords where citizens can just go to get the information, and it doesn't have to be this ask, get jerked around for 30 days, get your answer immediately, really depending on who you are, because they don't do an equal protection thing in North Huntington Township. You don't get treated equally in North Huntington Township. You definitely get treated depending on who you know, what you have, what your status is. That heavily influences your treatment. I can only speak for North Huntington Township, but nonetheless, there are ways to get answers from all the different municipalities. Let me know if this was helpful. Drop any questions you may have in the comments. Please don't forget to like, share, and follow. And above all else, continue to exercise your rights, continue to ask questions, and continue to show up.